Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Grind. I'm here with Farah Hannoun, who is a very well-known journalist in the MMA community. Farah, how you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So I first want to get into your journey so far in MMA and how you've gotten to where you're at with MMAjunkie, and now you've interviewed Conor, Khabib, Max Holloway, all these incredible names. I kind of want to get your input on, how you got to the point where you're at now.
Yeah, so I kind of started on Instagram. I run an Instagram page called UFC Newsletters. That's kind of been the start for me. I took a bit of a different kind of unorthodox approach to a journalism career. I didn't do as much writing as someone would usually do, but I just had to come up with something different because I was kind of like on the other side of the world, didn't have access to as much as most people did. So I kind of had to find a way to build my own network and community. And that's kind of what I did through that Instagram page. And yeah, I did end up doing a lot of writing and reaching out to fighters, of course, and interviewing and stuff like that. But it really started with that Instagram page.
Yeah, that Instagram page, UFC News Alerts, is amazing. First of all, I want to say thank you for not being for being just a news page. A lot of like these MMA pages are like, they'll post news, but then every day it's in my feed with something and something. It's like, if I see something posted by you, it's like it is something that someone's getting signed or a fight's made. So first, I'll say thank you for that, for not selling out and all that. But I also want to ask, how do you get your news so quickly?
It's kind of like building a network, really. You just kind of you build sources through the process. Obviously, the Instagram page is how I started out, but you just branch out on social media. I started building out my Twitter page as well, and for me, it was always important to be fast, but even more important to be reliable, because I think a lot of people get a little too excited about being first and not being right. So that's something I've tried to do. Sometimes you get it first, sometimes you don't. But for me, it was always important that I was reliable, especially if I wanted to turn this into an actual proper career instead of being just kind of like a blog page or something like that. So that was always important to me. A lot of times I'll get people, they'll tell me like, this fight was announced, like, what, you're late. And I'm like, it's not about being late or not. It's about, I want to make sure that I can confirm it myself, or my colleagues can, or someone with kind of like a reputation for being accurate. And that's what it was important for me, was always to be reliable, because if you don't have integrity, then it's hard to kind of have a career in this industry.
Right, hard to be a UFC news page when you're not posting accurate news. So how did you get into not just journalism and MMA, but MMA in general? Have you been a fan for a while, or?
Yeah. I started out as a pro wrestling fan. I have an older brother. He kind of got me involved in all this stuff. Did taekwondo as a kid, so combat sports is not something like crazy new to me or anything like that. But grew up a pro wrestling fan, and then my brother kind of like told me about the UFC, and it started like the beginning of the Ultimate Fighter. I watched that, and then but it really started like properly watching maybe 2008, 2009, something like that, around GSP, Anderson Silva, even WEC days with Cruz and Faber and those guys. So yeah, I've been like, I was watching it then, but maybe like properly following the UFC in terms of like press conferences, pre-fight buildups, all the stuff that comes with it, rather than just the fight itself. Probably started with Chael and Anderson, their first fight. That was kind of like, because my cousin was showing me all this stuff, like the press conference. It was fun. It was like the perfect way to get me properly hooked into the sport. But I was watching like random fights before that. But that event is when I started to like religiously follow it.
Yeah, I feel like all fans have that one event where it was like that one got them, going in the hardcore. So you talk about the pre-fight build-up and all that stuff, and everything going into not just the fight and interviews and all that, but all the building. And you were in Abu Dhabi for Conor, for a ton of these cards. What's the atmosphere like, specifically for the Conor Poirier card? Like that fight week, what was the atmosphere like in Abu Dhabi?
It was interesting because it was very quiet and intimate. Like the fighters didn't really have anywhere to go, right? So it was they had this was the first like Abu Dhabi event in a while that, or like part of the Fight Island stint that had part fans. They started obviously with Calvin Kattar and Max Holloway, but the fans really came out when it came to the McGregor Poirier fight. So to be part of like, it felt a bit normal. I did 242 in Abu Dhabi, so that was like a regular fight week and stuff like that. But it had been a while since we had like kind of like a press conference and all the stuff that goes in before a fight. But yeah, I mean, it was cordial between Conor and Poirier that time around. So it was, yeah, it was kind of an intimate feel with like the bubble that we were in. Like you couldn't really go around like just to the press conference, to the weigh-ins and stuff like that. But yeah, it was interesting. Like it wasn't like the typical Conor McGregor fight week with the animosity and stuff like that. He was kind of portraying a different image that people seem to enjoy. So yeah, it was different Conor.
Right. And you had that, obviously, that Conor interview where the famous clip that everyone's seeing with Max Holloway. Do you like, is that would you say that's your favorite moment? Or I feel like that's a big one, right?
Yeah, I mean it's got to be one of the best, because you know what it is. It's like Conor had done so many interviews. I kind of got him last, one of really the last people to get him one-on-one. He had done a lot of virtual stuff, and then he had sat down with a couple different outlets. So I was kind of like one of the last people to get him, and it just reaches a point where everybody's asked him everything. Like the only thing left is maybe to ask him where he got a suit from or something. Like it's like all the questions have been asked, and especially that the build-up was pretty amicable with this one. Like it wasn't anything crazy, but so you kind of have to, because I have a different audience as well, and I was doing this for UFC Arabia, for Abu Dhabi Sports, so it's a different audience. I have to ask these questions. I can't skip over kind of the matchup and the stuff he's already been asked. It is, like I said, a different audience. It gets translated, and some of these people don't watch anything but what UFC Arabia deliver because they don't speak English, so I can't not cover the basis. So that was a little bit tough, because I know people are complaining like, the same questions every time. And it's like, you know what? I don't even listen to other people's interviews, which is kind of like, it's a good and a bad thing. It's bad, I guess, because you end up repeating a lot of the questions. It's good because you try to kind of like, I try not to get affected by somebody's theme. Like subconsciously, you might do it by listening to somebody else's interview, and you kind of follow that same path that they're doing. So I try to have my kind of my own conversation. So I wasn't listening to any of the other interviews, but I knew for a fact I was going to be repeating. So when the Max Holloway thing happened, I'm like, this is perfect. Especially at the beginning of the interview, his kids were running around all over the place, and it was kind of hard to focus and stuff like that. I'm like, oh man, like this is going to throw me off. And then when that happened, I'm like, boom, that's all I needed. Like that's the clip
that was that golden ticket moment.
Right.
So you talk about everyone has asked Conor questions, and just fighters in general. Everyone's already asked them every question, especially leading up to a fight week. How do you find, like you said, the specific questions that no one's asked, or the questions that people enjoy hearing responses to?
Well, sometimes like I don't know, like maybe if you pick up on something that's happened, whether on social media or stuff like that, you never know when a fighter is going to open up. Like sometimes you'll get fortunate. Of course, it has to do with asking the right question, I guess. But it's also the way you ask a question. Like sometimes you could irk a fighter with a certain way you phrase a question, and then they'll just give you a great response just because you've like unintentionally bothered them by the way you phrase your question. Like, sometimes people throw out like, if you ask somebody, like people feel like you're done, or they call you overrated, or you could end up just like firing them up without even noticing. So sometimes like it's the most random questions that I'll ask that'll get the best responses. And then sometimes it's a question that I feel like, okay, this was a great question, and I'll get the worst response. So it's kind of like hit and miss with this stuff. So I just try as much as I can to have a conversation. That's what it is. So I don't try to pre-plan too much, more than just have a proper conversation. And I feel like most of the times it'll get them to open up rather than kind of like an interrogation. I try to actually listen to what they have to say, and I just build off of their answers. That's kind of been my method. A lot of these interviews I won't even prep, and people have found that weird, but I'm like, I like to actually listen to what they have to say. And of course, if you give me a fighter I've never heard of, which happens a lot, like there are a lot of newcomers that get signed, or people you may have heard of but you don't know, you have to pay them that respect of doing the research, of course. But when it comes to the guys that we already know and we watch all the time, I try to kind of just make it conversational, listen to what they have to say, and build off of their answers. So I don't actually do too much prepping and research when I interview someone.
Right. No, that's interesting. Because for me, I mean, I feel like, I'm still fairly new at this, but when I interview guys, it's just like I feel like I have to have something ready, because so far for me, I'm sure with years of experience like you have, it gets better, but it's difficult for me to like just build off of a question. So hey, props to you for being able to do that.
No, it's you'll find kind of like your niche. You'll find the style that you enjoy that works best for you by trial and error. Trust me, I've had a lot of interviews that haven't been the greatest in the world, because the problem with my method is sometimes if fighters just give you the one word answers, because a lot of times they'll be cutting weight. It depends when you get them, right? Or they've done like a million interviews and you're like, oh, you're the 100th interview that they're gonna do today or whatever. But yeah, like sometimes that method kind of doesn't work out too well because some fighters aren't too talkative. But you learn like you're like, all right, I'm gonna interview this guy. He's not super talkative. I'm gonna have to change my approach a little bit. Then you got guys like Michael Chandler who you could talk to him about anything. You know, he's great talker and great guy to have a conversation with. So he'll be a lot easier than somebody else who doesn't often give the best answers.
Right. So your 2020 was a very big one. I feel like, yeah, even though it was amidst a worldwide pandemic, that's a bit redundant. But your 2021 was massive. Can you kind of describe how you feel that year went for you?
Yeah, look, I'm very grateful because obviously like COVID hit a lot of people hard. I mean, my father got very sick from it. I know a lot of people lost their lives and stuff like that. So it was a very tough year. A lot of people lost their jobs as well. So I was very blessed that it opened a lot of doors for me. So it's almost like, especially when I talk to people that aren't even in the industry, like friends of mine or people I know, I almost feel bad just saying that it was a great year for me because I know it's tough on a lot of people. So, but yeah, it happened to open up a lot of doors for me, being that I live in the Middle East and being that Fight Island was created. I didn't get to be a part of the first Fight Island, but I was fortunate enough to be part of the last two. So it was great for my career because we don't get a lot of big things happening on this side of the world. So it just happened to be like that. Where it benefit me in my career and where I happen to live. So yeah, I am very grateful. It has given me a lot of opportunities that I try to capitalize on as much as I can. Because I mean, events are back in Las Vegas and stuff, and it's just hard for me to get to that side of the world. I'm not going to be the go-to when it comes to the other side of the world. So I was fortunate enough to be able to cover events that were in my region.
Amazing. Yeah. So kind of wrapping up here, do you have a specific fighter? I know you mentioned Michael Chandler earlier. Do you have a specific fighter that you like talking to the best? I know it's hard to have favorites as a journalist, but do you have a specific fighter that is a good interview?
Well, Chandler is definitely one of them. I've been fortunate to interview him plenty of times since, because his kind of UFC career has been very tied to Abu Dhabi. So it just kind of like happened to be. I sat down with him. I spoke to him twice when he came as a backup, and then twice or maybe three times when he was there for when he fought Dan Hooker. And then I talked to him pre-fight before his fight with Charles Oliveira. So he's a great guy. He's a great interview. You could tell he enjoys doing media. Israel Adesanya is another guy that has a great banter and is willing to go back and forth. He'll give you the snappy one-liners, all the stuff that the journalists and reporters are looking for to create headlines and whatnot. So he's great. Conor is great, of course, but I've only spoken to him once. So, but it was a great interview for sure. So yeah, like I'll probably say those three. Dana White is obviously always great as well because Dana gets very animated as well. I mean, everybody enjoys watching a Dana White interview, so he's definitely been one of my favorites. I felt like, weirdly enough, although like I don't know, because I kind of got thrown into the first Dana interview I ever did. Like, kind of, it wasn't something that was I knew I was getting him, but I didn't even plan. It was so like spontaneous, but it was fun because I just kind of developed this style of Dana where I just have a conversation, just shoot a bunch of questions, try to get info, and then he'll laugh about it. And yeah, so those are fun. Like, that style of interview with Dana was always fun.
Awesome. Well, Farah, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. It's been great talking with you. You're really great, intelligent. Your questions are always very, very good and very well spoken. So wish you the best in the upcoming year. And thank you for taking the time again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, have a good one.